opposition has remained faithful to the focus that we anticipate that they will come with. So it was a healthy dose of racism from their benches. They made the usual noise about you can't eat infrastructure, you can't, that we're borrowing too much, that they did a better job, and all of the things that I mentioned last week that I will speak of in greater detail shortly. However, I wish to address one issue right at the beginning that represents an ongoing saga of the opposition, collective opposition, trying to distort the history, and I'm not speaking of ancient history here, but also contemporary history, of them trying to rig elections and trying to cast doubt now on Gcom's ability to conduct free and fair elections as a form of distraction from that record, but also as an excuse for the impending defeat that they will face at the polls. So on Thursday last, I think the Gcom met with Nigel Hughes at his request, and he came out and said Gcom is incapable of holding elections. And I think the next day they issued a press release and spoke of Gcom's disarray in the lead up to elections. Now, if anyone is in disarray, as any independent observer would recognize, it's the opposition. So in their statement, very short statement, which they said will explain in detail why they said Gcom is incapable of holding the elections this year. They said that Gcom did not provide a coherent justification for rejecting biometrics. And two, that they witnessed major internal disagreements between the commissioners at the meeting. Now, clearly, the AFC is either unaware or it's hiding from what takes place at the commission. We've had 3 commissioners there from the PNC AFC who have consistently sought to undermine Gcom's ability to hold free and fair elections. I'm not going to go back through the record and the instances in which they have done so, because it's a long list. But you can recognize that consistently they have done this. And so the fact that you have disagreements at the commission's level is normal. It is an attempt to fight off the path that they're leading us onto. So that's nothing new. That has been there from the beginning through all elections about disagreements at the commission's level and the need for the chair occasionally to mediate those differences. That's normal. But the threat to the elections, free and fair elections in 2020, did not come from the commission, although some elements, the opposition elements, subsequently aided the attempt to rig the elections. The threat came from the technical staff. It was Lowenfield, Roxanne Myers, and Mingo, who were staff members of GCOM who were identified by the COI as having played a role in rigging the elections in favor of the PNC and AFC. So if you find the commission dysfunctional or not reaching a chord on everything, doesn't impact on the ability of GCOM to conduct elections. That's normal. Uh, would they, if you agree to what, say, Vincent Alexander proposes, the rest of the commission, in an amicable fashion, we will violate the constitution of the every citizen, constitutional rights of every citizen of this country, based on what he has proposed in the past. So that's not a sign of dysfunction. And the fact of the matter is that the chair was very explicit as to why she rejected biometrics. So the allegation by the opposition has been that there is voters impersonation at the place of poll, and that you have multiple voting taking place at the place of poll. And they have provided absolutely no evidence whatsoever to support this. And if you go back historically to this issue, you will find that this is far from the truth. In fact, in the last elections, they applauded election day's activities as being free, fair, and transparent. President Granger came out with a statement. This was before the declaration was made, and said polling day went well in the country. They've supplied absolutely no evidence of voters impersonation. So they're saying now the biometrics would solve a problem that didn't exist. Is not the main problem. The main problem with elections is their attempt to steal the elections using people like Lowenfield and Mingo. So the chair spoke extensively as to why biometrics introduction at the place of poll as the sole method to identify people is unconstitutional. And even as one of the methods might require legislation and still deny people the right to vote. And GCOM, I would urge you to read the detailed press release of GCOM on the 28th of January, where they outline in great detail what the feasibility study in relation to introducing biometrics pointed to. They showed that there are some positive things about biometrics at polling places, but there are they identified 7 challenges that are major and some of them are insurmountable in a short period of time, but even over the longer period, even beyond the 2025 elections, in introducing biometrics at the polling places. And the seven challenges are outlined in great detail, and anyone who is unbiased would see that this could disenfranchise people at the polling places, and it would lead to confusion around the elections, and that is what they want. They want multiple fronts to claim on election day that there is rigging going on or something of that sort. So they are trying to create an issue where there is none. GCOM's ability to conduct the elections have been vastly enhanced, improved. In fact, it is better now than before to conduct free and fair elections. There'd be a whole array of international observers in the country and local observers to ensure that the robust systems at polling places to prevent voters impersonation will be faithfully observed. And so we have no such fear about their ability to conduct the elections because we are not looking for an excuse or for, and we're not attempting to rig the elections in the PPP. The, the AFC and the others, the PNC have said they will internationalize their challenges. Well, good luck with this. President Ali recently had a call with Secretary Rubio, and I saw a press release from from the State Department. And Secretary Rubio remembered in the conversation about the challenges of 2020 because he was one of those senators who stood up against the Granger's administration attempt to rig the elections. Wasn't just coming from the State Department, the executive at that time. It came from members of the legislature, both from the Senate and the House in the United States of America. And so they remember this. It's just a short time ago. And so good luck with their attempt to internationalize this issue. We too will internationalize it. We're going to be dealing with that shortly. Nevertheless, I thought it necessary as General Secretary of the PVP to meet formally with Gcom to express our views. I've had the Executive Secretary write Gcom, and next Tuesday I'll be meeting with Gcom to address these matters and to debunk some of the nonsense that we see in the media um, in relation to this matter. As I said before, the matter is only kept alive by certain elements in the media, but they all know that the AFC and the PNC, that they have no credibility whatsoever to talk about free and fair elections, and that they are misrepresenting this issue as though the question is biometrics or no biometrics. That's not the issue. The issue is, has there been voters impersonation, and do we have a robust system at the polling place now to ensure that we don't have multiple voting? And the answer is yes. So I'll be speaking with the commission next week on this matter. On the budget, if I were to speak in the National Assembly, um, and really, I'm not encouraged to the level of mediocre presentation from the opposition benches does not encourage me to speak. I like actually like a challenge. And looking from afar, if I were to characterize the debate and their performance, there are a few things that come to my mind. First of all, they're a dysfunctional group. And it's no surprise that they're a dysfunctional opposition because they were a dysfunctional government. And it's just an overhang of what they did in government. I'm not going to enumerate the numerous cases of the government being dysfunctional from 2015 to 2020. But I just want to focus on their presentation in Parliament without getting into specifics because I can't bear to repeat the the nonsense that they talk. So everyone is announcing policy, from the most junior member of parliament to the most senior ones. From AFC and APNU, they're all saying what they will do. So often what they announce is contradictory. And the promises are not thought out. They're not costed. It's just like off the top of your head. So imagine if we were running a similar ship. We wouldn't have had a manifesto in the PPP that had where the ideas came up. You had to first of all examine their ideas through several parameters. One was sustainability. Two was whether the ideas would result in either greater welfare to the citizens of the country or, secondly, to the expansion of income levels of the people of the country. Then the third issue is, could we afford this in a holistic framework? So only after placing the ideas in that context, then we will decide whether they will enter the manifesto or our plans or not. For them, anybody comes up with anything and just announces it. Oh, Patterson said he wants to build a ring road around. Well, Patterson likes rings and bangles a lot. I hope it's not a gold bangle or gold ring he's talking about. Then someone, a holder, says, we'll do this. A third one says, we do something else. Often the ideas are contradictory even to what they say, because they're saying we're emphasizing too much infrastructure. You can't eat infrastructure, but they want to build a ring road that would be 10 times the amount that we're receiving from the oil and gas sector. Contradictory in their objectives. Last week, I explained how a single promise that they made recently through one of these information things that they share out will be about 1 trillion, will cost us $1 trillion per year, when the oil money, total oil money in this year's budget is 512 billion. Twice as much as the oil money. And this is only in relation to recurrent revenue. This is only in relation to recurrent revenue. And so, you have a problem? You good? Okay. So this has to be dysfunctional. How could you make all of these promises without even coordinating? Because they have no intention of implementing any of them. It's just like off the top of your head to sound good in a budget speech. So you did this, we're going to do something else. How can you really take this opposition seriously? as to form the new, say, a government after the 2025 elections. So if you look through the presentations and look at the contradictions and the wild promises, you can only conclude that this is a dysfunctional group. So I don't know what Norton, who will speak today, will announce. He will come with his own set of measures because his junior MPs announced everything already. And in fact, more than he may even want to promise for the PNC. And they just did it off the top of their head. Oh, you getting 100,000, we'll give you $1 million. No costing, nothing whatsoever. They don't have a framework. So that's the first thing. I'm not going to go through their individual expressions of dysfunctionality because they're too numerous to mention. But just as a macro theme, that is what you can find in their presentations. The second one, the second macro theme that I found running through all the presentations is dysfunction, they're delusion. No, they're delusional. Apart from dysfunctional, delusional. So they're delusional about the success that they had. You can hear them say with a straight face, people are better off in 2020 when they left office than they are today in Guyana. That is a healthy dose of cognitive disease. So they're delusional. What's an expression or two broad expressions of this? Oh, we're the ones who are democratic. The PPP sought to rig the 2020 elections. You got to be delusional to argue in 2025, in the face of all of this evidence, that the People's Progressive Party sought to rig the 2020 elections, and they persist that we are installed undemocratic, etc. And they were the rightful government. You got to be delusional. And as I said before, that people are better off. So when a Eureka Finance can say people have had more jobs in 2020 than they have now, you have to examine her for that. The expression, that statement has to be examined in this concept. You can only say something is if you're shameless or delusional. And I don't want to ascribe shamelessness to them. So I'm going to settle for a more benign expression, which is them being delusional. And you see a lot of this in the budget, throughout it all. Oh, we were doing great here. No, you recall, what's the one? I always forget her name, Annette Ferguson. Annette Ferguson said, we did 6 wells in the 5 years in Region 9. And that's a great expression of success. And the 6 wells costed less than what through the SLED program, they gave to one of their members of parliament, Vincent Henry, to distribute. So their entire water program for Region 9, that is hinterland water for Region 9, was less than what one of their members of parliament got from the SLED program, a grant to distribute in his own discretion in the region. But they think they did a fantastic job there. They did a fantastic job of doing this. They would go and talk about basic stuff. Oh, we clean one canal, and the country must now applaud them for doing this and give them a medal because they perform some routine mediocre task. They elevate the mediocre to great, an expression of great success and achievement. Mediocre things. I wonder if they were building a bridge like across the Demerara River, you would hear no end of it, because when Patterson built a little bridge in Moruca, you remember the bridge in Moruca? Oh, we have to pay homage to them, glorify them for this great effort to build a little bridge across a river in Moruca. That is delusional, being delusional. And that is the second broad theme of their presentation. You'll find multiple expressions of it coming from multiple speakers. The third is dishonesty, downright dishonesty. So today they're claiming that there are nearly 2,000 Amerindian CSOs who were sent home, which was done in August by them in 2015, that the PPP sent them home because we didn't make some provision for them. Normally, the thing is that there's a provision in the budget where you can continue to fund wages and salaries and employment costs even if you don't have a budget. You can't fund capital costs, new capital projects, just rollover projects. They terminated the CSOs, sent them home, and the reason was given in Sidney Alicock, a useless person who was there as one of the vice presidents, who stood by was they discriminated openly against indigenous people and wouldn't utter a word. He said, oh, they were wearing red. Some of the CSOs were wearing red and walking around the community, called them the Red Brigade. So two things happened. Not just did they send home those people, the CSOs, in the largest act of discrimination against indigenous people in this hemisphere in maybe the last 30, 40 years. Because when you consider 1,972 persons losing their job immediately versus the size of the Amerindian population, it is really one of the biggest acts of discrimination you could see. But they did it on the basis that these were maybe have been closed people. It's not true because the villages selected them, but that they were PPP supporters. So they brought in this thing about you can only get jobs if you're PPP, you can't get a job in an APNU government. Just imagine we had adopted the same philosophy when we got into office. We would have the large numbers of people that they put in got jobs in the public sector, including hardcore activists of the PNC who are in the Ministry of Health. They just stayed on because they're Guyanese. We didn't care too much whether they supported the PNC. They stayed on. Even the people that they put before the elections, they hired a large number of people, maybe 8 months before the elections, and didn't pay them a cent. A lot of them, we had to pay them the back pay and kept most of them. There are a few that in the health sector who, very, very few, who lost their jobs, and some of them then got rehired through the part-time job program. But they didn't even pay their own supporters. These were their activists that they put in the public sector before the elections. We ended up paying them. because we didn't see them as PNC activists, although they were PNC activists who they put there. We saw them as Guyanese. But for them, Sidney Alicott mentioned that these were people, the CSOs, in a statement to Parliament were reading red, was concerned about what they were. This is dishonesty, an expression of dishonesty. So that now in their presentation, they're saying the PPP fired those people, not us. It's a rewrite of history. It's a dishonest rewrite of history. I can give you numerous examples of that in the budget. Numerous examples across, as I said before, multiple speakers and in multiple instances were dishonest about what they did. They're attempting to rewrite the history. That's the third big theme of that I found in their presentation. The fourth is an unbelievable level of incompetence. Incompetence. I'm not just speaking about individual incompetence in the budget presentation. A Coretta McDonald, who we are paying now as a supernumerary, I think assistant head mistress or something like that, or deputy head mistress. So she gets a salary now and that paid for by the state, although she's squatting and getting probably a salary as general secretary of the union and then as a member of parliament too. Remember, she denied getting the salary and was caught lying, taking two salaries. She was caught lying. Just go back and check. Well, she couldn't even spell corruption, and she teaching our children, or supposed to teach her. She's never in the classroom. So I'm not talking about the individual level of incompetence, and you have a healthy dose of that there. I'm talking about incompetence as a group. And this is why the incompetence leads them to various conclusions. So they think, as I said last week, that they hit the mother lode, that they hit a jackpot. They're making a very great point. But they're so incompetent, they don't understand how an economy works. So that is why they can sprout a lot of nonsense and believe that they're dealing with profound economics. So you hear repeated, the debt is too high. And we have dealt with this a million times before. We have dealt with it in an absolute sense, how the debt is stable and declining, particularly the external debt, which is the big debt part that you have to look at. We pointed out the difference between internal and external debt, how the external debt is in nominal terms close to what it was in 1992, although our economy is 71 times bigger than 1992. And the debt is around the same figure in nominal terms, that's external debt. Two, that the stock of the debt, the overall stock of debt, is a fraction of the GDP, one of the lowest in the world, coming down from one of the highest in the world. It's one of the lowest in the world. That servicing that debt now is a fraction, one of the lowest in the world when compared to their revenue as a share of revenue. We've pointed this out 100 times. That's how economy works in a relative sense. And we are not borrowing to consume. We're borrowing to build the infrastructure of the future. And our capacity to repay that debt has been vastly enhanced. We dealt with that, but you know the explanations get lost on people who are incompetent and don't know. So they keep repeating it and they say, oh, we're making a great point here. It's not a great point. It's stupid. You look at every economy in the world and you would understand this. That's how economics works. And in our case, you have countries that are borrowing now to consume. and their debt grows every year, including the developed world. The developed world, you go to Japan, their debt to GDP ratio is 250%. Ours is maybe 10%. So the second thing, so that's the point they make. Because of their incompetence, they keep making this point that is too high, we borrow too much. Two, they talk about you can't eat infrastructure. So only people who are incompetent who would make that point. And they're contradictory about it. They want us to spend more on infrastructure, but you can't eat infrastructure. This is another expression of their incompetence and their inability to understand that you have to invest in the future. If you don't do that, if you bring the same philosophy to yourselves, if you don't build you, something for yourself, you can't grow. That is why people sometimes, business people, borrow, and we have threatened to invest in anticipation of creating greater income and greater wealth for themselves and their families. The country has to be run on the same philosophy. If we promise better world-class healthcare, we have to get the supporting policies and investment to deliver it. It can't happen by magic. That's why we build the hospitals and improve the all of the systems, etc. If we promise world-class education, you have to give more people scholarships and build more schools and better quality schools and educational institutions. How do you achieve these objectives without supporting them by investments? But how do you support ease of travel and greater comfort and cutting transit time, which has an economic impact as well as a personal impact? If you don't build roads and bridges, how do you get cheaper energy if you don't build power plants? But they keep making the point over and over. So you have to be notoriously incompetent to think that you are making a valid point when you're talking nonsense. Over and over, they say this sort of thing. And that is why they had a disastrous economic policy in the last government. It was taxation, but no, the capital budget didn't grow. They ate it all out. Higher taxation, $94 billion more per year, um, but they ate it all out. So last week I dealt with a point where they said they didn't have oil money. But if you look at the oil money alone, say $500 billion in this year's budget, if we take our spending on three sectors alone, healthcare, education, and housing, almost all of the money is gone there. So you're talking about oil money. We have oil money. Well, look at where it goes. Almost all of it, if you look at three sectors alone, almost all of the oil money goes to those three sectors. They wouldn't have done it. So they didn't have oil money. They're right. But they had 94 billion more per year of higher taxes that we remove because we promised to the people of this country that we're going to remove them, go back to the old tax rates and remove the VAT on a number of things. So we did that. But I saw someone pointed out today where the oil money, the revenue was going. They didn't have oil money, and I didn't even remember it. They put a picture of Nagamutu being powdered in the parliament. Now they took a big section of the parliament office, a whole room, and converted it into a salon, paid for by the taxpayers. That government members of parliament used to go down there to get their hair fixed up, powdered up like Nagamutu. It took a lot of powder for him and stuff like that before they made any speech. That is where we were spending our money, and it's not a lie. I'm not joking. I forgot all about it. They used to go down to be powdered downstairs before they came up for budget presentation. We eliminated all of that nonsense. If you want to get powdered up, they can walk with their own powder. Nandalal could walk with his powder and put on his powder there in Parliament. You put on whatever, but not paid for by the taxpayers. Not paid for by taxpayers. So, oh, they didn't have oil money, but they found higher staff and everything. It was a big performance like that. That was their biggest priority. Not the substance of what they were saying in the parliament, but the form, how they looked. And so that's why they could have increased the personal income tax from 30% to 40% for people in this country that we recently talked about, and bat no eyelid. They could have put VAT on electricity and water and babies, milk, and all of that without batting an eyelid because they looked nice as they were passing the policies. That is, but this is it. That they don't have oil money and they still want to use that as an excuse. So these were just some expressions like of incompetence. When you don't understand economic policy, you can talk a lot around these issues and think you're making a great point on debt, on infrastructure spending, but it has no validity on sustainability. If you want the country to grow and prosper that we'd all be proud of, we got to do all sorts of things. We got to help our public servants. We have to help the farmers like we are doing now. We have to help the bauxite workers that they devastated. We have to help people get more homes. We have to get them more scholarships. We have to get better health care. And we have to build the infrastructure so our people have nice roads and bridges and that sort of thing, and power plants to drive on or to be supplied with. We have to do all of this together in a consistent framework. That is important. So a healthy dose of incompetence is the fourth big theme that I find running through all of these presentations. The fifth one is racism. So always it's about, in some presentation, we're discriminating against particular groups of people. They have no evidence whatsoever. This was one of the most racist and elitist government because it was not just racist, but it was elitist. So it targeted the Amerindians lost their jobs, Indo-Guyanese lost their jobs and drove, and then also ordinary Afro-Guyanese. They didn't treat them better. They didn't get no house lot under them. The elitist one got all the land. The elitist ones got all the jobs. They took the contracts for themselves, Katius and the others. Ordinary people, you didn't get small contractors, young black contractors too, took everything for themselves. So it was racist and elitist. And today, but notice something, that they often give the Indo-Guyanese in their midst their talking points to speak about racism, as though if they say it, it becomes less racist. So I remember Daniel Siram from Region 4. He went to New York and he said, we're discriminating against Afro-Guyanese. So that was Mahi Paul's big theme. Now this guy is a sycophant and also a political lowlife, a sycophant. But they believe this is how you build up brownie points to be part of their collective. Contrast that with the People's Progressive Party. We don't, people who come to us, we don't say you have to run down another race or people's religion or even the other political party to find a home in the PPP, because we take people because of who they are. They become part of our family. We don't have to use them to that they got to overcompensate to find a place in our midst. This is what happens there. They feel they have to overcompensate some of these Indo-Ghanis to find a place there. You don't need to do that in PPP because we are inclusive. We practice that. We feed people. Our family is made up of people of every race and every religion and gender. That's a PPP family. And so we don't need that. You don't need to go and run down somewhat, people. Like we don't say to the Afro-Guyanese, come on, you got to run down Afro-Guyanese to be part of, to be part of our collective. You never hear them have to do that. They speak about development for all Ghana. In those Indo-Guyanese, they believe they have to run down, we're giving only the Indo-Guyanese communities to be part of that collective. It's a racist philosophy that they have. And you should examine it carefully. There are numerous expressions of it, and it has happened historically. Because they're not genuine about national unity and viewing people as Guyanese beyond race. They view that first is your race, and then you have to pass that litmus test, and then the second one is your class. You can be a poor Afro-Guyanese man or a rural Afro-Guyanese man or an urban one in South Georgetown or anywhere else. You got to belong to a select few. This is racism at its worst. So you found that a healthy dose of that coming through most of the presentation. That's the next thing that I found. And then this talk about corruption. So they have the friends, family thing and corruption. Imagine they get a partisan to talk about corruption. I don't want to, there's some bad expressions that come to my head when I think of partisans speaking about corruption, so I'm not going to say them. But really, Cathy or partisan or all of these people talking about corruption in government, these were the most corrupt people ever. And so everything, I dealt with the friends and family thing last week about who are friends and family. We love having more friends and family right across the country, people of every race and every class and everything else. That's fine with us. But so the corruption thing was another theme of the budget, the usual worn issue. And that is why I'm happy that some of our members of parliament reminded them, not because we're stuck in the past, but because they're trying to whitewash their image, whitewash it. And you needed all the whitewash in the world. Wouldn't be adequate to whitewash their image. Wouldn't be adequate. But they're trying, because of unsuspecting people, to talk about that. And then, of course, no vision for the future. I've dealt with that multiple times. These were some of the themes that I saw throughout the budget. And so I didn't pay attention to all the individual expressions of them, but this is what you see. Now combined, it's a mediocre performance. Mediocre performance. They're just not ready for the big league of running a country. They can't run a country. And not because they're bad people, they're just clueless. Not because they're Guyanese and everything else, but they're just clueless. They don't have a clue what represents sustainable economic policy, and how to pursue it. It's just as simple as that. So I notice that if you read Kaichor and Starbuck News, you would think that they had a great debate performance because they hardly gave the government MPs much publicity and publish the stupid things that they say without fact checking them or recognize or even, well, but I think basic journalism should force you to speak about their sustainability. But they just repeat some of the usual stuff. So let me tell you. So that's for Parliament and the budget. So listen to what the WPA says. 1.382 trillion budget, a campaign trick dressed as governance. Very profound from the WPA. Ever a two-man party that ran down every single thing that they were ever given responsibility for. And so I'm not going to even deal with this. Even on the cost of living thing, they keep mentioning cost of living, but they never would address the measures that we took. So they kept saying the 9 billion in the budget for cost of living, but they don't look at the over 100 billion, nearly 200 billion of other initiatives that will impact directly on people's cost of living. So if you look at, somebody just sent me Cathy Yu's presentation to the parliament. And it was just, I think, just before I came here. So I'm not going to go into individual, as I said, individuals and their performances, because they all fit under the broad themes that I spoke of. And Norton tonight predictably will follow one of those things. But just to show you how a single presentation, I'm taking this as an example, could be replete with lies and delusion. So they said that the APNU AFC did not derail their mileage fall. That the IDB said did not want to approve a loan. So I can produce for you a letter of commitment from the Inter-American Development Bank to fund up to $100 million of this project. I can give you a copy of that letter, a commitment letter from the Inter-American Development Bank. Cathy Yu says that the IDB did not want to approve the loan. I can show you the letter. Secondly, the Nord Consult study that was done after the project, after they claimed corruption and that we didn't need to go this route, that Norway commissioned a study. And the study showed that a Myler Fall was the best option forward for renewable energy and for energy options. I can point to you instances where the same AFC, APNU AFC, lied on the project to derail it. One, they said that there was a $2 billion debt when there was no debt. There was a contingent liability. How would we were not building the Amila Fall project. We were taking the Norwegian funds that we earned, 100 million through the sale of forest carbon, to put in as equity into the project. But The project was privately financed, and we were committing to buying power at 10 cents per kilowatt hour when the cost of generation at that time was 30 cents per kilowatt hour. Last year, Patterson said in the parliament that the cost, we were buying power at 30 cents per kilowatt hour. Continue to lie. They lied on the debt, on the purchase price of the, the power plant. Thirdly, they they um, they said that the project would run out of water. That the hydrology studies show that the project would run out of water. That is why you build reservoirs. But hydropower globally have challenges sometimes in drought. But that's why you build a reservoir, and the project would have had a reservoir. They did everything to undermine the project. That ceiling that we had to, to raise was to give the guarantee on the contingent liability that if GPL failed to make the payment for the purchase of power, the state would have paid for it. That was it. It was a contingent liability. They killed the project. But here in 2025, she goes to the parliament and lies about it again. And then you remember Cathy Hughes and the others were busy on this side working for Site Global. You remember that too. So that's the first thing. The 18 million signing bonus in her presentation today, that we sought to sow confusion and mistrust, that there was nothing wrong with that, the 18 million. Now, every Guyanese who has a good memory would recall that they kept the signing bonus a secret, as they kept the agreement that they signed in 2016 a secret. We learned of it about 18 months after they had signed it, and they had already received the money. But the media asked Jordan before that, when the issue surfaced, what about the signing bonus? And he said, go back and Google it. He said, we did not request, neither did we receive a signing bonus. This was the Minister of Finance saying, we neither requested nor did we receive a signing bonus. When the signing bonus was already in an account outside of the consolidated fund that is required by law for you to pay it into. They didn't put it there. He denied the existence of the signing bonus. And he himself had authorized the setting up of the account outside of the consolidated fund. Total lie. This is from the Minister of Finance. And then when the matter got heated and it came out that they had collected the money and put it in this account, when in an interview with the media, he said, the reason we kept it basically outside of the consolidated fund, as is required by law and the Constitution of Ghana, is because we thought it was a gift. Go back and read all of these things. They're in black and white in the public domain. For Cathy Hughes in 2025 in the budget speech to come back and lie again about it shows the duplicity or how delusional these people are. Their duplicity, the whitewashing again of their history. So she sought to whitewash their history on Amila Fall, whitewash the history surrounding the attempted theft of the signing bonus. Then she goes on. By the way, she said police officers are bandits. So police officers are bandits. Now listen to what she says here again. With liberalization, costs should have fallen. People not benefiting. Only two ICT companies were set up in 2024. So you have to question, how is this liberalization working? So this would be, you recall the history of this again. It's called whitewashing again of their history and their record. APNU in their manifesto placed that within 100 days of coming into office, if you check their manifesto in 2020 and 2050, they will liberalize telecommunication. We had already drafted the law to support liberalization. They passed the law, and then the minister had to sign an order bringing the law into effect. In 5 years passed, nothing happened. Failed on this promise. We did it within a month of coming into office, returning to office. We brought the order into force. PM signed it, and the sector was liberalized. So now she's saying, how does that benefit the people of the country? So now whitewashing what they promised, what she failed to do, and one would question how cozy she was with the telecommunication companies. We're hearing a lot of stories, and somewhere we need to find out if any companies owned by CATIUs or friends and families of CATIUs were getting contracts from some of these companies that would have benefited from the non-liberalized telecommunication sector. So we need to, that's something we should explore. But notwithstanding all of that, so she failed, they failed on doing it. So she said, only two companies got exist or were set up now with the liberalized. How is this benefiting? So what has happened is that, how has it benefited the people of this country? Today, there's competition. The cost of bandwidth has fallen significantly. Significantly. So you can get 3 times the capacity that you were paying for in 2020 at the same rate today, the same price. If you pay the same price today, you get 3 times the capacity. And it's helping people. They didn't only not liberalize the sector as they promised, but they came in and put a VAT on data use. So people were using data, they had to pay 14% more every time on your bill for companies and for individuals. And so this is in 2025 trying to whitewash their history of doing this. But you can't do it with us because we remember this, but people out there may be seduced by this non-explanation that they gave as explanation. We get more mendacious propaganda on rigging. So now here is our defense of the rigging now. They have not sanctioned staff involved with 47 boxes on the East Coast. So CATIUs wants us, the Gcom, to sanction the staff of Gcom, 47 of them, for not putting some documents in the box on some of these coast polling places and taking these documents directly to Mingo. She wants these 47 people sanctioned. On the other hand, there must be no sanction for her who defended the rigging of the elections, for Patterson, who said he saw the SOPs and that those SOPs match the figures that Mingo was calling out, the lies that he told. There must be no sanction for the primary riggers of the election, because her husband is defending them, which with the Mingo and the others. They're being defended by her husband, but she wants these 47 presiding officers to be sanctioned for election rigging. And guess what these people, she wants them sanctioned for? Because they complied with an instruction by the RO not to put those documents in the boxes and take them directly to him. So that is why we amended the ROPA. So no RO in the future could give these varying instructions, because in the manual now, everyone would know, every presiding officer, what should go in the box and what shouldn't go in box. But Cathy Hughes wants these poor presiding officers who followed Mingo's instruction legitimately. They didn't steal the documents, they only handed it to him. She wants them sanctioned, but her husband can defend. They can defend the primary riggers. They must not be sanctioned when they should go to jail for rigging the elections. This is the kind of duplicity that we see. And talking about Jago economics and all of that, I don't know, all right, economics here. They have zero economics. Listen to Nigel Hughes, right? And he has to post a very profound economic policy that the aggregate economy is equal to non-oil economy plus oil economy. And he finds that very profound. That's the kind of economics they will run the country with, or the one that they practiced when they were in office. So just in a short, I didn't even go through all the other lies. I didn't go through all of the other lies, but just to show you in a single presentation, it's illustrative of what takes place in Parliament, of all that I've spoken about before. The delusion, the distortion, the whitewashing, the dysfunctionality, all of these can be mirrored in a single presentation, and you would find those running through almost all of the other teams. I'm not going to use other examples because you will find them here. Since I talk a lot about the Starbucks News and their editorials, this week I just want to say there are two editorials that were written and critical of the PPP at the end, but this is the sort of editorials that I must say, even if they're critical of the PPP, but they raise a number of questions that in our society should be debated legitimately. And when a newspaper does that, then it raises back the standard rather than get the political hacks or some of your reporters who have an axe to grind to write these editorials and to generate them through ChatGPT. So one is called the hidden cost of our decisions, and it raises several questions for our society that we need to answer when we craft the way forward. It speaks a lot about our orientation and policy making, but also the culture and where we want to head with that culture. And it raises questions about small businesses, the kind of help that they need, but also the thinking that is pervasive in many of those quarters. So I don't think, although it might be critical of the PPP, but it raises some good questions, as societal type questions. And the same one with the sanctity of the contract. So at the end, it criticizes us on the ExxonMobil issue and the renegotiations, but it does raise a whole range of issues, sanctity of contract, and when it doesn't apply, that's the editorial. And I thought that if extended, an editorial of this nation is extended a bit more, can serve as a useful platform for discussion. to go into like the consequences, because they made a point. The agreement provides for renegotiation, but the agreement provides for renegotiation only if both parties agree to do so. And Exxon has made it clear they don't agree to do so. So then you have a dispute. And then, assuming that that happens, pose a hypothetical, and then look at the consequences of that dispute for a whole range of things. The timing of it, especially net zero environment, the global scarcity of funds going into the fossil fuel sector, the United States seeing the expansion of the oil and gas sector to boost its prosperity, how all of these things fit into a country like ours that need large scale investments to unlock these potential, which is, like I said before, the investments alone for the in the oil and gas sector is more than 5 times the size of all of our deposits, our saving deposits in the banking sector. So an editorial of this nature extended into those sorts of nuanced discussion could serve us well. And so but so I see these are as great in a serious attempt to tackle some of these issues. So although I'm critical often, I want to make sure say all when I see things that are posing real questions, then that people need to debate and understand, then I should also call them out. Um, you recall that I told you that there is a plot. The plot started off before the AFC elections, a selection of Nigel Hughes as their candidate. So ultimately forced through a poll. Um, that was the mechanism. I spoke about this 5 months back. Um, to force Norton out of the presidential candidate slot. And then that was recently exposed when Norton said one thing, I'm going to be the candidate. Nigel Hughes said, we hadn't settled on this. They got to be scientific polls and all kinds of stuff. So I saw AFC doing a poll themselves online. So if APNU and AFC were to go into elections 2025 as a coalition, who would be your choice for the presidential candidate? This is AFC putting out their own poll. Of course, you know what they're trying to do now. This is a scientific poll they're doing. So the poll will close end of January, end of February, I think, and they would need 1 month to analyze the results. Now, this is an online poll. It's yes or no, Norton or Trump. They gave two choices there, Norton or Nigel Hughes, and then, or maybe you should have put some. Let me don't make fun of the people's poll. But those are the two choices, and you need a month to analyze the result. There's an online poll, which from the moment it closes, you should be able to know. And guess when they're going to publish the results? I thought somebody was making fun of them. April 1st. Now, we all know what April 1st is in Guyana and globally. It's All Fool's Day. They need a month to analyze this, and this is on their page that they will publish the result on All Fool's Day. It's interesting what's going on in that camp. It's so mediocre and like childish, and so transparent what they're trying to do. They're trying to bully Norton through these unscientific things, try to undemocratically install Nigel Hughes, who nobody wants, because even the people who thought he was thing now they're laughing at him because he's proven to be very, very shallow on every issue almost. Mediocre. So let me, as I said, today is budget day, so I'm going to end there, short today. I can go on. I wanted to spend today to talk about the positive things in the budget too. So, like, because those don't get highlighted. So this year, consistent again with what we said about community issues, you would see a big subvention. The subvention to NDCs have grown maybe by 400, 300%, 400%. And the primary focus will be in these NDCs for the increased spending will be on garbage collection, cemeteries, because we've had a complaint about it, cemeteries, and also they would deal with small drainage work. We are parallel to that buying equipment that will give almost all of the NDCs and the municipalities more equipment, compactors for garbage, as well as they already got tractor and trailer, but now mini excavators. So they got tractors and trailers, mini excavators, and compactors, so that they can do a better job at garbage collection. We're looking at developing more sites away from communities so that we can properly dispose of garbage in these communities. So that's the focus, and their budget has increased. Here in Georgetown, we're doing the same thing with the cemetery. This is a big thing. What you would recall when I visited Alboystown and La Penitence and stuff in the community meetings, people raised these concerns, particularly in that area, the Lerpentary Cemetery. And we, I said to them, we are going through the roads consistent with our promise in these areas. We made those promises in election time at local government elections. We're fixing the roads, and later we'll come back to work on these things. So we're starting to, that will, in this year's budget, you will see a lot of work being done on these issues, community-based issues, and that is not there. I want people to look again at all of the tax measures. You'll notice they're not talking, almost none of the presentations on the tax measures. It's either too complex for them to understand, because they confuse a lot of stuff. And I can understand an ordinary person confusing it, because they don't like, really look at this on a basis. But you're a member of parliament. One presupposes that you understand basic stuff. That is why you're selected here to represent people. And if you don't understand basic concepts along with the theme of incompetence, then how could you really represent people? So they don't deal much with the tax measures, but the tax measures will bring enormous benefit to people and additional disposable income. Notice again, they're not speaking about the other measures that will tackle cost of living or keep costs down. None of those are dealt with. They have this blanket thing. There's nothing for anyone in the budget. The usual stuff. There's nothing for everyone. There's nothing for poverty. We dealt with that last week about what constitutes the fight against poverty. It is not just a handout every year. The biggest way of getting people out of poverty is making sure you create the conditions for them to find jobs, that they have a job, they can work, they get better paying jobs, they have a taxation system that allows them to keep more money. That's the first thing. You got to get a job. Secondly, you have to own things. So getting a plot of land, owning your own house, etc. Thirdly, you have to get quality health care and not have to pay for it. And we're making that investment. Then education, you must be able to educate yourself so you can get better paying job in the future, and you must not pay for that. The state is providing that. putting in basic infrastructure in your community so that you don't have to walk on roads anymore. You can start a small business because the cost of doing business gets reduced. Ensuring that interest rates come down through the taxation system allows affordability for small loans for business development as well as for mortgages. These are all the sustainable ways of fighting poverty, apart from just helping giving people more money directly. So they don't look at any of these measures in the budget, but those ultimately would help people to fight poverty. You know, the Ureta Finance or whatever her name is, they said something like, oh, the poverty rate is 48%. She's looking at some old study done almost on the app now. Because a number of people, I suspect if you did a survey there and you just went into Berbice and the Sugar Belt or Wales or any part of the country in the mining communities or Amerindian areas and did a survey then, oh, the people didn't have jobs. She's quoting the old study. All these old studies, not from our tenure in government. Somebody got to look at, you got to look at a way of making sure that people who get their degrees there, that they tend to, they just like, well, maybe, anyhow, they don't recall. I was thinking about recalling it. It's a really stupid thing to do. How could you present such a dated data to reflect that was reflective of your own incompetence and the decline in your period as the performance rating for this government? Is dishonesty too? And that is one of the themes of the budget, the dishonesty. So these are, I didn't want to go into great detail about the positive measures of the budget because those don't get reflected in the Kaicho and Stabrook. They don't get reflected at all there. They don't, they don't get reflected. They just get, but all these things. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Jagdeo, then Shabral Damarawi. Sir, I have two questions.
Mhm.
One, um, has Guyana agreed with the U.S. to take Venezuelan deportees if Caracas refuses to allow the planes to land in Venezuela? And secondly, given the impacts of droughts on hydropower stations in South America,
The first one, Dennis, again, what if Venezuela?
if Venezuela refuses to take U.S. planes with deportees, whether Guyana has agreed to take those deportees from the U.S.? And the second one is given the impacts of droughts on hydropower stations in South America, the latest being in neighboring
Droughts
Suriname.
and what?
Given the impacts of droughts,
Drought. Oh,
yes,
drought. Oh, I thought
on,
you said
on,
drugs. Yeah.
on
Okay.
hydropower stations in South America, the latest being in Suriname,
Yes.
which now has to rent standby power, what plans the government has to update its hydrology studies, including climatic predictions, before investing in any large-scale hydropower projects?
Okay. So climate change has posed challenges for hydropower, and so, but I don't think you can beat hydropower at this stage as in terms of cost and being base load at the same time. Notice I said base load because you can get maybe solar power cheaper, but it's not base load. And what I mean, it doesn't run 24 hours a day continuously. If you put in the batteries, then the costs go up significantly. So that true, if you do a grid tie-in system, you might get it fairly around the same price as the hydro, but that means you can only get it in sunlight when there is sunlight. If you go to put in batteries, the costs go up significantly. So hydropower at this point in time today will outcompete wind energy and solar as baseload and still be competitive in terms of price of energy. The, you have the challenge of more variable weather patterns globally. So I think you have to, this will impact on water supply. So this means I don't think you can stop building hydros globally. China is now, I saw plans to build one of the largest in the world, bigger than the Three Gorges project. And but you have to, this will have implication for reservoir size and your backup capacity. So if you build it and you have a period where you have drought, then you have adequate backup power to fill the energy demand of the country in the period when you have the drought. So it does present challenges, but I don't see it as fatal to the development of hydropower. But of course, when you develop it, you have to ensure that your studies are done and updated. So that is clear. Um, we have not been asked to take Venezuelan refugees or deportees by the US government. No, but I can't deal with hypotheticals now. They may never ask. And that is a matter that has to be considered carefully. But we have not been asked. We have not been asked to take Venezuelan refugees, or not refugees, deportees. I see the United States is exploring other plans. I saw a 30,000 facility at Guantanamo Bay that they're refurbishing now to hold migrants there. I think they've listed migrants some countries already and some categories of migrants that they would hold there. I don't want to deal with hypotheticals. Countries are now run that way and dealt with. You asked me a question if they asked us, and the answer is no. Yes, I said that. You have to, of necessity, look again at hydrology risk. But the model also that we have pursued in the past and we intend to pursue place the risk to some extent at on the investor because they will not be paid for period like for energy. They may be paid for capacity but not energy for the period when they don't supply power. And since it would be that project, that facility will not be owned by the government of Ghana, like how we own the gas to energy facility. We're just purchasing power there. Then we share the risk. You share the hydrology risk here. So that is, but clearly an investor, if they're coming in to invest and needs a sort of return to justify the investment, they would have to examine that themselves to see because it's their money that they'll be using.
Dr. Jagdeo, Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. The PPP has a history of building individuals who turn out to become a thorn in their sides. Glenn Lal, Kaicho News, BK. Now, it has been recently released that Terrence Campbell would have had massive hundreds of millions of dollars tax waivers under this administration, and it is known that his empire was built under a previous tenure of the PPP. Is there something surreptitious going on with these relationships? And if not so, can you explain?
So I did not want to address the Terence Campbell craving for relevance. We've almost seen, well, we have seen an almost childish petulance, posting every day, tagging people, hoping they would comment on some nonsense he says that will get him some sort of publicity and relevance. And we are too busy to be part of a game to feed people's ego. However, I think given some of the things that he spoke of, that maybe I should address it and the way the, the way I see this. So let me say a couple of things. So I see a massive. Let me tell you how I feel about this matter. So people out there think, like I meet a lot of people and they said, don't pay attention to these chaps. They're a waste of time. They feed off of comments you make to gain relevance. GHK Lal, his diatribe, useless diatribe. This is a man who had a sordid history with APNU, who was part of the goal board when a lot of shenanigans took place, who is not fit to comment on anything about any government, who defends the incompetence and the attempt to steal the elections from APNU. Every week he writes, every day I think he writes about me, and I don't pay much attention to him because he's looking for relevance. Glenn Lal, the same thing. People say, oh, he's a madman. Don't talk about this madman. You just give him relevance. So Terence Campbell has been doing the same. And I, I want to say to people, it's not that they bother us. So I saw this self-serving, almost arrogant post that the PPP is afraid of if he enters into politics. We heard that from others too, that we would be afraid. Now the PPP has fought APNU when in the darkest days. We have fought every attempt to steal the elections by various means. We withstood an armed insurgency. We withstood their criminality, street protests, burning buildings. We have fought off every group that has challenged us. And the reason we have succeeded is because we have remained faithful and consistent, faithful to some ideas and consistent in the defense of those ideas. Progress for all of our people, all of our people, of every race and every religion. And people must live in a condition of freedom in this country. And those are universal values that we've always supported and consistently fought for. And that's why we have prevailed over all sorts of forces, big and small. When APNU was in its heyday, or the PNC was in its heyday, the last government, they had control of the army. They were using the police and the army as weapons against the PPP. And we fought them off. They used the budget as a weapon against us, and we fought them off. So you have to have a healthy dose of delusion again to believe that the reason why we take you on from time to time is because the PPP as an institution is afraid of your entrance into politics. The reason I take them on occasionally is because I like to expose the fakeness, the shallowness of these individuals, the make-believe world in which they live, the pseudo-intellectualism that they project, their pathological ability to lie. And more importantly, their holier than thou attitude. So they believe they're a special group of people in a small but dwindling circle who have a healthy dose of disdain for ordinary Guyanese because they think they're special, because either they are born into some privilege or that they live in a tiny circle that may be based in Georgetown and that sees themselves as the intellectuals of the country. So I love taking them on. This is a personal thing because I resent their disdain for ordinary people. And it gets expressed every day. So I saw, after we exposed Terence Campbell for who he was or is, that he continues to write about the NRF. And when Ashni Singh responded with an ass whipping, an intellectual ass whipping of Terence Campbell, he couldn't deal with it. So he then went to disparaging Ashni Singh. And so he, in a very condescending way, says he remembers how Ashni Singh was placed in handcuffs for selling off some land on the East Coast, but basically implying that Ashni Singh faced the courts for some dishonest activity, and that how he knew Ashni Singh's father. So he's very concerned about this. It is his way of saying Ashni Singh was dishonest. Now Ashni Singh was placed in handcuffs and chained by the last government. I explained this last week, for doing one thing, for following a decision that went to the privatization board and the cabinet, for selling the Movitown land at $20 million per acre when the public tender, the highest price in the public tender was $12 million. It is the same APNU people who went when Movitown was established. They went to open Movitown. But at that time, one of the highest prices, higher than the public tender, through a process that went to the privatization board, which was made up of 3 non-governmental organizations. The recommendation went to cabinet. Cabinet approved it on the period, and Ashni Singh implemented it. So it wasn't dishonesty. If anything, it reflected the vindictiveness of Campbell's friends. Remember, he said when he left ANOG that the only reason he joined the ANOG, not for what Anok preached or was preaching at that time, that they want to bring people together, to bring the two parties and everybody together. But his reason for joining Anok was he wanted to keep the PPP from getting back into office in 2020. And that his friends from the PNC that he had made major contributions his whole life to, and he's always voted for financial contribution, stabbed him in the back. Now, that's Terence Campbell, hardcore PNC, who joined Anok to keep the PPP from getting back into office in 2020. So his friends, he applauded his friends for pushing Ashni Singh in Bangals. Now, he didn't talk about Winston Jordan, who transferred large quantities of land to people, gave them title, without any approval of the cabinet, without collecting a cent. Illegal. You can't give a person title to land unless they pay in full. They didn't even make a payment. Some just made a tiny down payment of 5% and got the land titles for the land. Not a word about that, the dishonesty. So he wanted to disparage Ashni Singh by bringing that up. He's a vindictive person who believes that he's clever. He just believes that. So he brought that up. Secondly, Ashni Singh spoke about the 2020 period and his absence from the whole period when they tried to rig the elections. And he said, the reason I was doing this is because I was doing my doctoral thesis. Now that's dropping in a hint that he was so busy with his doctoral thesis. It's people who are insecure who got to drop these things all the time. It's this fake middle class kind of approach. I was doing my doctoral thesis on the impact of adulterated oil on chicken nuggets. So he was doing his doctoral thesis, and it prevented him from making comments about the attempt to rig the elections. Again, this particular fake thing. So you brought up the question of the write-offs that he got. So when the document surfaced, there's a document that's in the public domain that surfaced where he secured a massive write-off from this government on the 25th of September 2020. I saw it and I sent it, it came across my phone, and I sent it to the Commissioner General, and I asked, did you release this? And he said, no, he did not release it. So I thought it was a fake document, because you can have a lot of fake documents going around. People can just, now with AI, you can generate any document. So I thought it was a fake document. And then I saw him responding and giving some attempting to explain why he got this write-off. That shocked me, frankly speaking. It shocked me. And then there was some complaint about the government, they need an investigation as to how his records got released to the media or wherever it got released. But the reason it shocked me, because the same Terence Campbell maybe weeks before that document surfaced, was responding to something from a title. This is his post on his page, and Amir Ahmad Sheriff Group, and then spoke about the sheriff group or this gentleman evading taxes. So this is what it says. I'm going to quote a section. My suspicion was that he was underpaying his duties and taxes, and I subsequently called the shippers and asked that they cease and desist from sending large correction advices for this gentleman. If my suspicions were correct, it would have been the first time I'd seen someone trying to evade duties this way. Usually the invoicing would be on the goods. So weeks before that, he was talking about a Guyanese company and another person evading taxes in the country and not paying their rightful taxes. And then at the end of that post, he said, maybe Jagdeo should have GRA investigate Amir and the sheriff group instead of Terence Campbell. So he wanted me to tell GRA who to investigate. So this was his call on Jagdeo to investigate. So I did not. That's why I was surprised to see the man who was complaining about other people not paying taxes to recognize now that he was massively in evading taxes, massively evading taxes. This same do-gooder, butter can melt in your mouth individual, fake intellectual, holier than thou, condescending to everyone else, who knows the best for the NRF, was involved in major tax evasion. And under the PPP, he got these massive write-off. So first of all, let me say that what this represents here, in my view, in my personal view, is a sort of criminality that goes beyond simple tax evasion. Now, when you have the interest and penalty waived on VAT alone, the interest and penalty was $108 million that he got waived, written off. Now, there's a peculiar thing about VAT. Unlike other taxes, when you collect VAT, you act as an agent of the government. The VAT does not belong to you as a businessman. You collect VAT from the people who pay VAT on behalf of the government, and you have an obligation to immediately remit money that you collect, or within a short period of time, to remit that money to the GRA. If you don't, you are converting people's money and taxpayers' money to your own use, fraudulently. That is with VAT. That's unlike the other taxes, which often are derived from your income, etc. In this case, it doesn't belong to you. So if you take it, you're stealing it. And one thing I can say about Terence Campbell, that he does not discriminate, because he kept the VAT paid on spicy chicken, as well as the VAT paid by his customers on original chicken. He kept it all. Didn't remit it on time for you to the GRA. That resulted in such a massive write-off of penalties, $108 million of penalty. So it's using the money that belong to the state, and that in the paying customers, the ordinary man who walk in and buy a two-piece chicken, paid the taxes, and he kept it. Didn't belong to him. And this is the guy who lectures everyone about probity, who lectures us about the Natural Resources Fund, and he is the most, he's honest. Ashni Singh is dishonest. He is the man we must emulate and look up to. So the question is, though, is that we in the executive did not know about this write-off. You asked me about it. And now the Commissioner General is authorized to write off penalties and taxes. The law allows penalties and interest. But this has to be done on the basis of some transparent criteria. So I'm shocked that we in the executive didn't know this. It happened at the commissioner's level. This exercise of discretion under the law, I spoke with the president, must, if not change, the public have a right to know this. Because alternatively, or if this document did not surface, we would not have known that the Commissioner General of this country wrote off all of these taxes. $138 million of interest and penalty for Terence Campbell. And this took place on the 25th of September 2020. So what this says to me, that APNU, under the APNU period, he was allowed not to pay these. And as soon as we got into office in August of 2020, he realized then that this situation could not continue. This is my conjecture now. And so he hurriedly got this big write-off in the penalties, which we didn't know of. So maybe the contributions now, when we talk about friends and family, was it because he was a lifelong supporter of APNU, self-professed lifelong supporter of the PNC, and with his financial contributions, and that he had joined ANOG to keep the PPP out? Was that the reason why that was tolerated? Tolerated for him to illegally keep VAT money that belong to the government. Not just that, but there are other taxes there too. But what is so disgusting, if this had not surfaced, apparently his company, from what I realize now, that might have been bankrupt. Might have been bankrupt with great managerial skills that he professes, great achievement. Might have been bankrupt if you have to do this. So what irks me is if this had not surfaced, he was just cussing another company for not paying their taxes and how they were evading taxes. And this is a typical thing. It's more typical of the AFC. And looking for relevance, today he comes in the newspaper again. So looking for relevance. This guy looks for relevance all the time. He dug up two old IMF articles that from the past and made a post today to say, I was right. The IMF said I'm right. Now these are old IMF articles from the past. If he's just looking for attention like a child, because nobody knows or pays attention to him otherwise. So that got a post today. I was right. The IMF vindicated me. Now the IMF posted this a long time to say the pace of expenditure should match the pace of revenue, which we have done. And we exited the IMF since 2006 that they put us in. So we only have an Article 4 consultation with IMF. But I'm not going to get into that. But just digging up old article and posting it back and tagging people, hoping they would respond to him to some relevance. Then today, just as I was coming, I saw the Murar Wave story. He says, I want the two sides to come together, the PNC and WPA. First of all, there is a pathway to victory, or poll show. I don't know which poll, because on one hand, they're doing the poll now, the AFC, but his poll show there's a pathway to victory with the undecided voters. And then in the next breath, I'm fearful that the PPP will get 2/3 majority at the next poll. So there's a pathway to victory. And then the next breath, in the same article, he said, there's a path, and my fear is they will get 2/3 victory. And then they will want to exit the CCJ. Now, it was I, as president, who pushed to join the CCJ. That APNU, remember the Exxon exited the Privy Council. We pushed. We're the ones who supported the CCJ all along. Had the CCJ not been there, his cabal that he loves, Nigel Hughes would have succeeded in saying 34 is the majority of 65. And Lowenfield would have been allowed to disenfranchise 175,000 voters on the notion that he could determine what's a valid vote. You would have had APNU in power now, because that's what the Court of Appeal here ruled. And we will exit the CCJ if we get 2/3 support. And you don't need 2/3 to exit the CCJ. And so this is a guy looking for attention to get somewhere. Now, I think he will be willing to join any group. Now, again, at the center of things, nobody even knows who he is. And the thing is that he will be at the center. And so even the PPP is not saying we'll get 2/3. We're not saying we'll get 2/3. He is worried about that. So when they get, like the PP gets 60%, he would say, I prevented the 2/3 from happening. Terence Campbell, they were going to get 2/3 and I prevented the 2/3. It is so fake. I can't, they rub me the wrong way. That's why I spend time on this. They just occupy space looking for relevance. Their self-importance is so much. Oh, I was doing my doctorate on fried chicken at the time. I know I was so busy. I couldn't comment on the trying to steal elections. At the center of everything, this is dishonesty on the taxation side. Pure, unadulterated dishonesty. He complains about racism. This was the guy who said, I'm genetically predisposed to being a liar. Now brings back the race as a victim. He complained to the ERC. I hope the ERC is investigating this matter. Been a long time. He complained, I want a full investigation, because the man said, I'm genetically disposed to that Indian people lie. in this country. So the thing is that make believe these people, it's a old sort of thing, and it comes out of this circle that believe they're special. So guess what happened this week? I'm just showing you how duplicitous he because from what we are seeing, he was not paying his taxes, got a massive write-off. That's a fact now, but he was complaining about someone else not paying their taxes. Look at Nigel Hughes this week. A symptom of the same, or an expression, the same disease afflicts Nigel Hughes because they believe they're special, but they're shallow. So Nigel Hughes says he expresses sympathy belatedly now to the victims of the Lusignan massacre. And then people had to point out, but how sick could you be to do this? How duplicitous? How, I don't want to use the word, but it's like almost prostitute like could you be? That today you find it serving your interest to express sympathy to the victim or the families of the victims of Lusignan massacre when you were defending the killers and the court ordered an investigation that involved you with jury tampering in the matter. They believe that we're so stupid that we would not even have the capacity to see their duplicity and their fakeness. It's like Patterson speaking about corruption today and not answering all of the issues. And again, Cathy Hughes, you know, friends, she talking about friends and family, and she was taking contracts for herself. She didn't see that wrong. It is this group of people. They feel better than everyone else. You know, their key words they drop in. The doctorate, I was doing this, and stuff like that. But they are insecure. They have no plan. Now, all the achievements that we've been hearing about, these great achievements that were he accomplished with this company, that the company was being sustained on the basis, or partly sustained on the basis of taxes that should have been paid to GRA that belong to other people. This is my comment. I took a long time because I like doing this, not because I want to draw attention to them. As I said before, the PPP are not worried about these individuals politically, but because it is so fake and they look down on ordinary people so much. And they're just a bunch of losers. Thank you. Yeah.
Media has, in Guyana and media in general around the world, has always had their sides, and some even expressing bias in different circumstances. Now there's a cross-section in media in Guyana that is considered to be bought and paid for. Recently, some posts came out on social media about persons doing money laundering in the United States and laundering that money to Guyana, and financing small parties at the behest of the PPP. Are you funding Glenn Lal's party or any small parties?
Every week they have some rumors by someone who is funding APNU AFC. For example, the agreement they signed that they didn't want released that was released. And they said it's on life support now. I don't know if they had an infusion like of saline or whatever since then. But In their agreement, they said we have to agree on a budget for the elections in US dollars. Why would two Guyanese political parties that can walk down the road and see each other having an agreement that they have to have a budget in US dollars? Look at it in black and white. That means they're hustling money somewhere. Someone would give them money, and these guys notoriously would get, they will promise people things. They'll promise them all sorts of things here. And like what? Look at the Alston Short issue. Well, last week I dealt with it. That's how they would operate. So we don't need to fund small parties. People launder money for small parties, etc. Glenlal got a bunch of crooks, and they've been raising money from people abroad, telling them that 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 they're going to get help in the oil and gas sector and all kinds of things. We don't need to do that as a political party. We are campaigning on the basis of work done, fulfillment of promise, on a vision for the future. That's what, and a campaign of multi-ethnic uh, background where we are working for all the people of the country. No other political party is doing this. That's why we'd win the elections and win it massively.
Jagdeo, Kurt Campbell, Newsroom. I just wanted to ask about the decision by the new administration in the US to freeze foreign aid. Some regional countries already reporting repercussions. Trinidad, the military training has been canceled. Can you talk about the specifics of any immediate challenges to the support Guyana has
Yeah.
received from the US through any of its agencies?
We have not received any report about this, any aid being frozen to Guyana, nor it affecting us. And I spoke with the president earlier today and also actually said, so there's no such report at this point in time about any of their policy globally affecting Guyana. In fact, in the conversation that President Ali had with the Secretary of State, they spoke about enhanced cooperation between the two countries in various areas, including in the energy sector. And we're really grateful and thankful for the support of the US government eh, in reaffirming its, its strong support on the Venezuela border issue.
Niran Cyrus, Department of Public Information. Good afternoon. Dr. Jagdeo, can you say how soon after the budget has passed will the rest of the cash grants be dispersed?
Okay, I have the report here about what I was told, where they've done substantial work on registration. I must confess, I forgot about it and I didn't read it. I asked them yesterday. Um, so they have, they told me that they've completed the process in the remaining 5 regions. Let me see if I can find it for you here. I may be able to even share it with the media. Um, that they have so far the checks printed by regions, right? So after they've been registering people and printing checks. Um, Below is the summary of the checks printed by regions. Region 1, 16,356. I'm going to round up. I'm not going to go through all the details. Region 2, 10,000. Region 3, 23,000. Region 4, 177,000. Region 5, 13,000. Region 6, 20,000. Region 7, 11,000. Region 8, 7,000. Region 9, 16,000. Region 10, 7,895. These are checks printed so far. So now, as soon as the resources are placed in the, because we are appropriating, hopefully by next week, Thursday, the budget will be completed. You have 4 days for the estimates to be considered by next week. The remaining regions would start getting their checks. These regions. So they've completed the registration. But let me repeat once again that anyone in any region who's been unable to register, we're putting in place permanent arrangements where they can go in and get registered. And then I'd have to talk to them about how we deal with people who can come to the places and get registered, disabled, shut in, etc. We'd also have to sort them out. So even if they completed, say, region 6 or region 2 or 10, and people didn't get registered now, then that doesn't mean that's the end of it. We put in place additional arrangements. So that's where we are at this stage. Yes, let me see. Record submitted. So let me give you that too now. It's 22,600, region 1, 32,100. Let me go through that, round up again. 90,003, 266,004, 37,005, 78,006, 16,007, 8,508, 18,500, region 9, 29,000, 10. So there's still lots of people to register, like in some regions.
Dr. Jagdeo, Trishelle Silvers, Ghana Times. I have 2 questions. And on the topic of cash grants, regarding the tablets that were being used for the cash grant registration that were stolen from the NDC and Berbice, will persons' private data be compromised? And is there any way for the government to remotely erase data from those devices?
Was anything stolen? I don't track those things. You should ask Ashni Singh or the Ministry of Finance. I just give macro numbers. I don't even know that something was stolen here. When was it stolen?
Yesterday or the day before.
Yes, but they should be able to. I don't know. Was it stolen after the data was uploaded or before?
The report didn't say.
Oh, well, then that's what you should find out. Because if the data is uploaded already, then it shouldn't be a problem. If it's not uploaded and the registration they would have to repeat the registration. I don't know how many persons will be affected, but if it was stolen, that would be my understanding of what would happen. But you should ask Minister Singh or the Finance Secretary.
My second question, can you provide more information on GRAs?
Which community was it stolen?
I'm trying to remember, it's the NDC in Berbice. It's a Neighborhood Democratic Council in Berbice.
Yeah, but they're 24. Anyway, all right. Okay, go ahead.
And my second question, can you provide more information on GRA's announcement of the Auto Terminal Japan Limited will be the only company, for now, allowed to inspect uncertified vehicles for import in Guyana?
Which?
The Auto Terminal Japan Limited.
Okay. I suspect, I don't know what drove that. I'm not privy to that decision. I don't know. So maybe you should ask Stacia. But so are they saying they would not accept anything that is not certified here? Maybe it has to do with the declared value of vehicles. They had a scandal recently. You're aware of that? That there was a scandal where people were, especially on certain types of vehicle, I think the pickup, they were classifying them incorrectly, and people may even be changing the year of the year of manufacture. So this may be one measure to address that. But you
You,
can also find out there. I don't. Some of the small things I try to look at macro picture. Yes.
all right, thank you.
Okay. Right, sure.
Dr. Jagdeo just brought to my attention by WhatsApp. Some of the party supporters are complaining about their comments being muted and deleted from the parliamentary page. Obviously, social media is open platforms and people are giving comments. Just to have it look, the parliamentary page that is broadcasting budget debates presently. So maybe
they're deleting.
Supporters, PPP supporters,
Well,
comments and so on.
You
So
should ask the speaker to investigate it. Actually, you should call him. We don't control that, but we had some unusual things. Sometimes they mute things there too. It depends on who is administering the page.
another thing, Dr. Jagdeo, on social media, there is presently a poll looking to ascertain what are people's opinions on opposition leader between Nigel Hughes and...
I dealt with that earlier. I dealt with that. You fell asleep there, critic. I know
Okay,
you've been having a
who
hard
you'd be
time.
lending your support
Yeah, you've
to?
been looking for SOPs, I heard, in the interior. And they're probably falling asleep. Yeah, you fell asleep there. Right, you got to look at SOPs. You should go on we should do an Easter egg approach. Let APNU supply some of the SOPs and look at price it. Yeah, thank you.